Welcome, everyone. My name is Diane Feingood. I will be your moderator for this afternoon's, this afternoon in Eastern Standard Time panel on early career researchers and science policy opportunities, sparking a dialogue on models to support the next generation of Canadian researchers. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I personally am sitting on the unceded and traditional ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And I want to honor and thank all Indigenous nations on Turtle Island, which hopefully many of you are coming from. So thank you very much. Today's topic, as I said, is about early career researchers and their opportunities as they go forward. And we want to talk about training and career models for embedded scientists. We have a fantastic panel for you today. All of them have been involved in a particular program of embedded scientists called the Health System Impact Fellows Program, and they'll tell you more about it as we go forward. And when we get to the breakout session, we hope to hear from you and learn from you about the future for those trained as embedded scientists and your experience wherever you may be. So we appreciate that. So we're going to begin with two questions that we have for you. If you could change the slide. We were going to do this as a poll, but actually what we're going to do is do it as a discussion forum to get you warmed up to using the discussion forum for your questions. So you'll see a button down on the bottom. Could you start by answering the question, where are you from? And if you're not in Canada, where else are you from? But the question, what Canadian jurisdiction are you joining us from today? Just go ahead and type into the discussion forum if you would, and give us a sense of where you are. Lots of folks from Ottawa today, which is great, and from a few other places. Continue to enter that. That would be great. And then the second question is, what sector do you work in? What kind of work are you doing? And some sense of where embedding might be important to you. Please go ahead and enter that into the discussion forum. And while you're doing that, I'll just mention that we will use the discussion forum for your questions during the session. Great. Glad to hear that somebody from Germany is here. Bit late at night, but not too bad. Excellent funding. Excellent funding agencies. My own experience has been, I've worked in a couple of funding agencies over the years, so have a particular interest in how we go about doing this. Maybe that's why I get to ask the questions and these guys get to give you the answers. Excellent. All right, well, thank you for answering those poll questions. And I'd like to go to the next slide, and we will have our panelists introduce themselves. So our panel today, as listed here, are Dr. Deepa Singhal, Dr. Megan McMahon, Dr. Edelstein Brown, and Dr. Tara Simpali. But each of them comes to this space for from different journeys and different relationships to the Health System Impact Fellow program. So I would like to ask them to introduce themselves and to just tell you a little bit about their background that's relevant to today's conversation. So let's start with Deepa. Deepa, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be on this panel. It's really great to be here today. So my name is Deepa Singhal, and I am currently the Director of Scientific and Data Initiatives for the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorder Alliance, as well as an assistant professor at the University of Manitoba and a research scientist at the Manitoba Centre for Health Policy. I'm also a Health System Impact Fellow alumni, and I think that's probably my most relevant role for participation in this panel today. So I actually am a two-time, did the fellowship twice. Once in Manitoba and once in BC, and can speak to the benefits that the fellowship had in my career, as well as the skills and competencies that I was accelerate in advance.
Thank
It's really an amazing program.
Thank you, Deepa. And I can attest to the value to BC, having had a chance to work with you while you've been here in BC. Megan, I think you were next.
Thanks, Diane, and I'll echo Deepa's thanks for having me here today. It's great to see you and have the opportunity to engage with folks. My name's Meg, and I am the Associate Director with CIHR's Institute of Health Services and Policy Research and an Assistant Professor with the Institute of Health Policy Management and Evaluation. And I'm here today in my capacity with the Institute of Health Services and Policy Research as the strategic lead for the Health System Impact Fellowship Program. And so in that role, I've had the opportunity to help design, develop, implement, and evaluate the Health System Impact Fellowship Program and collaborate with the wonderful panelists and you, Diane, on the group today, and the many partner organizations and fellows that really helped make the program the success that it is. So thanks very much for the opportunity to share and discuss today.
Great. Thanks, Meg, and great to have you here. I think, Staney, you were next on the list that we had, so please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Staney Brown. I'm the Dean of the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. And I've had the good fortune to work with a lot of the folks on the call about the Health System Impact Fellowship and some of the work that is really geared towards trying to make sure that the incredible people we're training really help change our system.
Thanks, Staney. Really appreciate that. Lots of other things on your resume we could talk about, but we'll stick with that. Tara, over to you.
Thank you so much, and such a pleasure to be here today. I'm Tara Sampali. I'm the Senior Scientific Director in the Research, Innovation, and Discovery portfolio at Nova Scotia Health, and working alongside of the VP Research Office, Dr. Gail Tomlin-Murphy. We have had the good fortune of hosting a number of Health System Impact Fellows, and we are truly big supporters of this program, so very glad to speak in my capacity as a mentor for this program.
Great. Thanks, Tara. Really appreciate having you here. So welcome everybody who's here, and we'll just have a moderated panel discussion here for, I think we've got about 50 minutes, and then we have an opportunity for some breakout. So I'm going to start by asking Meg, I think, to describe the Health System Impact Fellow program just a little bit more, so that people who are not part of our little cabal in health and already know about the program can learn a bit more about it.
Hey, thanks, Diane. And in this closed room, I'll share that the Health System Impact Fellowship Program is, I think, my personal favorite program at CIHR. So the Health System Impact Fellowship Program is an embedded fellowship training program with really two key objectives. The first is to maximize the career readiness and impact of Canadian PhD trainees and postdoctoral fellows for a diverse array of sectors and roles, both within and beyond the traditional university sector. And the second is to really increase embedded research capacity with health system organizations to support rapid learning and improvement and awareness within such organizations for the value add that research can bring to decision making. In a nutshell, the program provides PhD trainees and postdoctoral fellows an embedded fellowship opportunity within a health system organization within the Canadian context, where they apply their research skills to help solve complex real-world challenges that are identified as a high priority by that organization. The program emphasizes mentorship, and so fellows receive mentorship from a senior level decision maker, such as Dr. Sampali, as well as an academic expert at a Canadian university. They have the opportunity to focus skill development on what we call an enriched set of core competencies. So areas like leadership and change management and dialogue and negotiation and other skills that are viewed as important within the labor market, but not typically emphasized within doctoral training. And they're part of a national cohort of what's now 200 fellows across the country and 100 organizations that have hosted fellows over the last 4 years. So really the program aims to align research talent with system priorities and prepare doctoral graduates for career readiness and impact in a diverse array of sectors and roles.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Meg. Really good description. Staney, what would you add to that description, if anything, about the program?
So, I think the program really kind of comes from this, in some ways, kind of, I think, very painful sort of comment that we got, but just a really kind of motivating thing as well, that when we're going through the initial training modernization work, we'd hear recent graduates say things like they weren't having the impact they wanted to have. And so we really built everything around this idea of how, really kind of the intellectual capital of the health system, these incredibly highly trained people, start to have early on an impact on our healthcare and our public health system.
Yeah, I've become over the years become compelled by the deep value of the embedding process as maybe the best way to get at integration in the future for health system and health system learning and building learning health systems. Deepa, do you want to talk at all about your experience of that being embedded, given that you have had a couple of experiences as an embedded fellow?
Yes, absolutely. So my first fellowship, I was embedded in the government. So I worked closely with the senior assistant deputy minister at Healthy Child Manitoba in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I cannot overstate the value of that embedded experience for a year working so closely with a senior level policymaker and decision maker and learning the policy process intimately through his lens and the lens of his team. And so in a PhD, we learn how to generate the evidence that we hope reaches the desk of policymakers. In the fellowship, I had a hands-on experience into how policymakers, or if policymakers, take into account that evidence, the complexities involved in what evidence-informed policymaking looks like. And then a host of other experiences that accelerated my knowledge into organizational decision making, policy making, the way the government functions. That was really integral to knowing how I could make an impact and apply those skills in that context that I wouldn't have had in my traditional PhD or graduate training.
And what about your second experience? I'm going to go off script already because I'm curious a little bit about, since you had two opportunities and two different sets of experiences, what you learned about that being a fellow, and also about the kind of mentorship that a fellow's looking for. And then we'll come to you, Tara, to talk about that from the mentor's point of view.
Sure, yeah. So my second fellowship was at the BC Academic Health Sciences Network, where I had truly a once in a lifetime opportunity to work with Dr. Tom Noseworthy, who is the CEO, the inaugural CEO of that organization at the time. And so that was a really unique fellowship experience where our focus is really to accelerate my leadership and management capacity while making an impact in the organization in areas that were really important to a CEO. So at the time, he was developing the strategic plan of the organization. And I learned all about strategic planning processes for complex organizations that had to engage with multiple stakeholders in order to arrive at consensus of how this organization was going to be placed in the landscape of the health system in BC. And that viewpoint was just incredible and enhanced my ability for strategic thinking, complex thinking, and bigger vision thinking that has actually been immensely practical in my current job, where scientific strategy and capacity building is a large part of what I do for my current organization. And also in that fellowship, the mentorship experience that I was provided was just unbelievable. So, Dr. Noseworthy is very open and very committed to mentorship, and ensured that I was not only integrated in the organization, but also brought to higher level meetings, debriefed afterwards on skills like negotiation and dialogue. We would go into meetings and after have a debrief process about what went wrong, what went right, lessons that I could apply if I were ever to lead an organization in the future. And it was all very practical management training that again is not occur in your typical graduate level training, and that was really just prepared me for an impactful career.
Yeah, I'll come back to you later to sort of explore a little bit more of those. What were those critical success factors in the two different environments? And is it about the person or the placement or both? So I'll just give you the heads up for that, and come to
Great.
Tara and ask her a little bit about the mentorship role and how to create a quality experience for both the mentor and the mentee.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diane. I mean, for us, I think in Nova Scotia, we have hosted several fellows and we continue to host. And it has been really important, the value this program has brought to us and the awareness of those embedded positions as we've all observed within the health system context, and nothing like the COVID times to help us realize how much that matters. So as an example, some of our initial cohort of fellows, Dr. Megan Sim, Dr. Mark Embret, and others, have actually developed this enough to say that it's not enough to have this as one-time operation. It should be an ongoing process. So we have actually created, with their help, a network or a community of scholars. So basically, they are placed in every program and every service across Nova Scotia Health. And even as we come, onboard more fellows, they have become mentors. And it really, for me, being an health system mentor, the excitement I have started to experience is that the system is actually pausing because we have the strategy to say, what does the best practice evidence say? I need to write a policy. I need to do this, to the point it's across. It's not only the service areas, HR, and everybody are coming to us. And the fellows have a unique experience. And as Deepa was saying, is to really understand how the system works, how the priorities are set, how policies are set, but really the value that this program has brought for our organization as we work across with our policy and government partners to really establish the importance of evidence. But also, I think all healthcare organizations are learning the value of the embedded scientist. So we are really so grateful. And in the mentorship program, we're always aware that we need to bring our fellows for their expertise, but they're also learning the other expertise, including working with patients and families and others as advisors, but also our system partners. And so it's been a fantastic journey for Nova Scotia Health.
I love it. I'm hearing culture change both for the embedded fellows being in a space where they might be able to see more direct impact in terms of the health system, and culture change for the organization, which is fantastic. Staney, I wonder if you want to jump in on that in your own experience. I can't remember whether you've had mentees or not yourself, but I know you know a lot about the program and what your sense is. Isn't that what you were after, was a culture change?
Yeah, and I think it's got to be a culture change that gets reinforced from all sides, right? So we've got these young people who I think take a very bold and exciting kind of step in their career. But on the same point, we've got to see universities start to kind of see impact really related to scholarship as an important part of how we kind of recognize and reward folks. And we have to see employers start to kind of figure out how they're constantly and relentlessly moving evidence into the decision-making process. And for me, that's an issue not only of kind of continuing to make the business case or making it clear why this is so valuable, as Tara's already said, but it's also starting to kind of generally upskill the whole operation in terms of their ability to use evidence. We had the estimable John Lavis years ago work with us in government, and he was able to create a really kind of clever training program to help get everyone upskilled a little bit. But I have to say, it was a great program. There was really a strong demand for it, though, within the ministry as well.
I'm thinking about that culture change in the academy, Staney, and it feels to me from where I sit like that's the hardest part of this process. What's your sense from your connection to training programs around Canada about what's happening at that level?
So I think the programs are trying to adapt. I think everyone recognizes that we need to make this transition towards a learning health system. That's going to have to be all parts of our system that make that transition. But it is, it's a cultural change process, as has already been said. It takes a while to lock in, and I think it's important that we be, that we persevere and at times be a little bit relentless about pushing this forward.
Mm-hmm. Deepa, what about your experience in our prior conversations of being on that knife edge with one foot in the system and one foot in the academy? How is your experience of that?
You know,
go ahead.
You know, I think at times and immensely rewarding at times. I think having the skill set that the academy gives us to have that kind of narrow methodological and content expertise, and then the fellowship I really view has broadened that skill set, and to be able to telescope back and forth in when I needed to do that for the different responsibilities I have in the organization can help you know, accelerate that impact. Yeah, and I think the sustainability of that sometimes I question, because the success factors, or what dictates success in the academy and what dictates success in real world organizations, can be different. And so managing that and balancing that is often a challenge, I think, that most fellows can attest to. Yeah.
And Meg, I know you are kind of at the center here, where you're in touch with lots of fellows and you have lots of insight into the experience that fellows have, even if you haven't been a fellow yourself. I wonder if you want to add to that sort of dual culture world and what your perspectives are and what you know about that.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. We've really tried to study and learn from fellows along the way. And so, you know, Deepa's comment on it being both challenging and rewarding is spot on, and I think we hear consistently from fellows. So it's challenging for the reasons that Deepa said. There's no shortage of opportunities, and the skills of fellows are in high demand. So fellows report that they're pulled into or invited to participate and contribute to many projects, which is exciting, but also makes it hard to prioritize, to keep their eye on, you know, their focus project, and to really you know, identify where their skills, where their contribution can bring the most value. But they also say that it adds tremendous value above and beyond what, you know, the training that one typically receives within their PhD training. So a great springboard is provided in the doctoral training programs, and this provides opportunity for those individuals that are keen to make an impact, that are keen to either lead an applied research career, that are keen to expand the opportunity for research within health system organizations, or that are keen to be health system leaders and bring evidence to bear on the decisions that their organizations face. So it seems to really enrich and provide a springboard for folks that want to contribute and make an impact. But it's not easy. And the path beyond the Health System Impact Fellowship has not yet been well defined and chartered. Although I think that Tara and her team in Nova Scotia are doing a phenomenal job of paving that way. So perhaps Tara can share some additional comments to that effect down the road. But we are tracking career trajectories, and just another comment to share that folks are launching into really exciting research-oriented careers that are some within the academic sector and mainly outside. So really exciting from that perspective as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. And sorry, everyone, to spring questions on you that weren't on the prescribed list, but that's the usual way. I do also want to invite the people who are attending today's session to offer their questions. Let's use the discussion forum. There's too many different channels here, but if you use the discussion forum, we'll keep an eye on that and integrate your questions into the conversation. Now, I know that the organizers really wanted to talk, who are fellows themselves or former fellows themselves, or really want us to talk about, so what next for fellows? What have we done to support fellows in such a way that that there is a career trajectory? And I'm wondering first, Meg, do you have any stats or reflections on what the career trajectories that you've seen so far are? And then also I'd be interested in your thoughts about what are the mechanisms by which we need to support people going forward, whatever you feel like sharing there.
Thanks, Diane. So we're just in the midst of finishing up a career tracking study that's led by my colleague Bahar Kasai. And so far it looks of the alumni whose careers could be tracked. About 60% are in science-related roles outside of the university sector, including in the private sector, the public sector, government, healthcare delivery organizations, research shops within healthcare delivery organizations. About 40% are in academic roles and assistant or associate professor positions, and across all of those, upwards of 25% identify as being in hybrid roles where they are like Deepa, for example, where she is the director of research within a not-for-profit organization and is also a scientist with the Manitoba Centre for Health Policy and elsewhere. So yeah, so 100% are employed. So employment success is high of those that were able to be tracked. Majority are in science-related roles, and about a quarter are in hybrid type positions. What we have not yet done and need to do is understand more about the skills that they're using in those roles, the impacts that they're making in those roles, and the link to the Health System Impact Fellowship. So there's still a ton to learn, but fortunately, the fellows and the alumni and the supervisors have been really keen contributors of studying and learning from in order to inform improvements in the program. So lots of opportunities to learn more. And I'm sorry, I can't remember what the second question was.
That's okay. Actually, what I want to do, actually, based on what you just said, is to turn to Tara, if that's okay, and ask Tara, who's got kind of a view into a smaller subset of the folks that have been trained in the program in your organization, and maybe even integrate the question that came up in the chat about, other than putting in place early career researcher programs that finance people in the next phase, how are you helping them? Because you did talk a little bit about this before. I wonder if you can say a bit more about that.
Sure. I think it's such an important opportunity for all of us to really understand, like I said, the value that is being brought by this program and those embedded opportunities. So for us, there were two things, that happened. Like, one is the system's readiness. Like, the culture change is really critical, to work with that and to help. We need to understand what is the system looking for, the way the evidence is being brought, and what does that look like. So in our journey, and even working with our fellows and the cohort that we are working with, it was important to understand, how can we bring evidence? What will that look like, and how do we produce it? So the value that the fellows are bringing for us is that they do what is called rapid reviews. And rapid reviews is not new, everybody understands. But these reviews are targeted in a way that it speaks the language for the system users. It's brought in a format. And so these fellows have actually helped us develop the templates that work for our decision policymakers, to the point now, on a weekly basis, the network of scholars, which is broader, and the fellows are embedded, we might be producing about 40 rapid reviews per week.
Wow.
And that is on every aspect the system wants to learn. So what has been really a fantastic moment for me, thinking about that culture change, where people email me and say, we are waiting for your rapid review to write a policy or make a decision. And that, to me, is a shift. When the system is waiting, and I get emails all the time to say, can you do a review on this? And the confidence I bring is because of this program and what it has initiated, is that now all the fellows, I can confidently say, that have come through the program have been hired, if not in the health authority, but kind of with our academic partners. They're all employed and they've not left the system. So they're all working. I know Dr. Logan Lawrence might be on. He's part of our network of scholars, Megan Sim, Mark Embret. So they're all part of it. So to me, I think where we are headed is like the step that Nova Scotia has taken, where we have said this strategy of a network of scholars brings the visibility to the system to say, yes, it is possible to integrate evidence, because we are creating the infrastructure where we bring the expertise, but in a way that is digestible for the system, in the way there is an appetite to absorb that. And for that, we need these scholars and fellows to be part of it. So that's where our strategy is.
So let me unpick that just a little bit, because we know and we might be able to talk about this a little bit later. There is a larger cohort or network that's being created from those who are fellows and those who are alumni. And as Meg said, I think it's more than 200 individuals now are part of that network. And I've been part of doing some training and engagement with the fellows over the course of the pandemic. But it sounds like you have your own little scholars network based on those who've been in Nova Scotia Health, and the work around rapid reviews, is that being done? Is that what they came to do, or is that what they're doing now because they're part of this network of individuals who've been related? And if I can say it off the side of their desk, they're doing this, or they're doing it as part of their fellowship. So could you just explain that relationship?
Sure. And I think that's a great question. So part of it is, as they did their fellowship, it was important to support them in doing their fellowship. So with that, I wanted to mention the challenges of being drawn in multiple directions. So what we have done, and what I do as a mentor, is to protect their time to complete their fellowship and the projects they need to do, because our priorities will always be there. But the way we do that is we have weekly check-ins with the academic and the health system mentors with the fellow to understand how we can continue to support them. But on the side, where their broader experience unfolds, is where we engage them in these rapid reviews. They also support implementation science projects, evaluation. So that's how they get their experience. So that's a Nova Scotia thing that we have started to build. But as a fellow and doing their fellowship, we work with them to support what they need to deliver as part of their program.
That's great. Steny, I wonder if you want to talk a bit about your sense of the value of the network aspect of the program, because I think that's a little bit different from just being embedded, but there are multiple burgeoning, emergent network aspects. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think we were sort of thinking about how this would look in an ideal world. You'd see within organizations a whole sort of life cycle of junior embedded sort of researchers, senior embedded researchers, and picking up a little bit on, I think, what Deepa was saying earlier as well. People who've worked in policy or in decision making or in other sort of settings in the university a little more frequently, and vice versa. You have that nice continuum surrounding you. Now, I think in the absence of that, it's really important to kind of create these networks to reinforce what's going on, find some ways of learning from each other, but also creating a community, a kind of practice around how to do this better all the time. And it's been kind of exciting to see how the fellows just start doing things and end up producing both, I think, kind of some interesting insights, but also publishable work at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is really quite impressive how much the fellows have found each other to do work that helps them in their careers, whichever they choose. Deepa, tell us a little bit about your experience of the networking aspect of this. How important is that to you, and how important was it to you as you transition out of a fellowship and into another career track? Because that's kind of where, as we push towards what's the future for embedded fellows, I'd like to understand how important the network was and is to you as you move forward.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. I really love this question, because the fellowship, and I can say that I never thought I would be working for a not-for-profit organization primarily, but so the way this happened was a genuine friendship got established between myself and my colleague Jonathan Lai, and who's a star scholar as well as a star fellow, who is very passionate about making real-world impact in a sector that I was very passionate about to shifting over. And it just happened authentically over conversations we had throughout the last year of my fellowship, over networking opportunities that Meg and CHR have facilitated, gotten to know each other. And when the time came for my fellowship to end, John reached out and said, "Can you help me develop a learning health system data grant for autism research?" And all my worlds collided, and I thought, okay, let's see where this goes. And it led into this position, and just amazing things happening in trying to champion a learning health system approach for the neurodisabilities and autism sector. So none of that would have happened without the relationships that I developed in the fellowship. And it was just this, organic friendship speaks to the power of authentic organic relationships. And I regret that the fellows don't have those face-to-face connections, but we are trying to facilitate this over virtual means, and hopefully they can have a similar experience. And then the relationship between all the folks on this panel and the relationship between that I have with my mentor, it gives you a network. It makes you part of something bigger than yourself, and it gives you a connection that allows you to take the time of very busy people. So I know that I've interrupted Dr. Brown during a very busy COVID period, and to my pleasant surprise, he made the time to have a conversation with me, which is just, floored me at that time, and helped me a lot to navigate this position. So it's really powerful during the fellowship and after. And then we also rely on this network, Jonathan and I, to get a lot of our work done. So, we were introduced to the concept of social capital and how can you use your network to actually make an impact. And because we have these rich connections and are part of this fellowship that is endeared by the network of mentors, whether we know them or not, it's easier to reach out to them when we need to actually make a decision in the real world or get some support, garner some funds, move actions forward. And that to me is priceless.
Yeah, we're getting to a topic that I'm personally passionate about, and that I would argue one of the problems. So, having been a former funder, one of the problems I see in the system right now is that funders don't value this work of creating the infrastructure that supports building trust and building networks. We don't. It's usually off the side of the desk and not something that we say this is actually the goal. And maybe part of the reason is that we don't necessarily have the evidence that says, investing in the network actually does give you all these other impacts. And as we know, those of us who are part of the Canadian Health Services and Policy Research Alliance and the work we've done on impact assessment, it's hard to connect those dots, right? And so where's the evidence that this kind of investment makes a difference? And that kind of makes me want to turn to you, Meg, and ask you to talk a little bit about, well, what do we know about the impact of the program on, or the impact of the relationship building on the products and the outputs and the impacts of fellows in their environments? And I know that's an unfair question, but I suspect you have a few ideas.
Thanks, Diane. It's such a good question. And we've, with you, actually spent a lot of time trying to develop the network and grow the network, but we haven't yet done a thorough analysis of the impacts and benefits of the network. Lots of anecdotal, or not even anecdotal, but lots of examples come to mind. So the one Deepa shared is phenomenal. A group of fellows got together and wrote, I believe it was 5 publications, rapid reviews that helped inform the UN research roadmap. Dr. Natasha Gallant on this call spearheaded the implementation science team in long-term care to help address pandemic preparedness in a time of crisis. There's many examples of fellows inviting other fellows to join their lectures and their classes as guest speakers. So there's publications, there's conference presentations, like the list is long in terms of what has been sparked out of the cohort and out of the network and among people that didn't have a relationship before they joined the cohort. So it will be really exciting to study more rigorously the outcomes and impacts of the benefits of the network. We know they're there. The examples are many. We just haven't done it in a thorough, rigorous research way yet. So stay tuned, and invitation to anyone that wants to join forces and do that analysis.
I only laugh because I think to myself, stories are good evidence. So I'm okay with that. Even if you don't have the numbers that you as a trained health services and policy researcher would like to have. So I'm just going to give you a slightly hard time on that. But why don't we take this as an opportunity to kind of now shift the conversation a little bit towards the future. So we can see that providing resources to embed fellows in environments really creates a culture, helps to create a culture change in an environment. There's a learning aspect to that. The organizations, the individuals are continually learning. You learn from different experiences, but what about the future for people like this? It still strikes me as a difficult situation. And I remember when I in past colleagues saying about MD, PhDs, you got to be one or the other, because you're either really good at one thing or the other, or you're mediocre at both. So convince me that's not the case, and that this, you don't have to convince me, convince the audience that there are ways to support people going forward, or help us think about how do we support people to straddle that same fence that they straddled during their fellowship? What do we need to do? Staney, you got some thoughts about that?
Yeah. So in some ways, I think we've done the most important thing, which is launching this change. It's interesting for me. I think Canada is actually a bit of a laggard here in some ways. I did my undergraduate in the States, and kind of the mark of being a successful sort of policy person was you'd actually worked in government for a while. You were kind of straddling both worlds. You were sought after. And when I watch American news when I'm traveling or something else, I see a lot of my colleagues on the news regularly, not just to be the expert in this or that area, but to actually be talking about their experiences and what they think are going to happen in policy. So I think there is a transformation that we're starting now, and we're really kind of building in many ways, the people who will carry that transformation over the line with things like the Health System Impact Fellows program. I think the second thing we need to do is and this is a challenge to the academies, is to make sure that we recognize this. I spend a lot of time now mentoring junior and mid-level faculty, and we're trying to put these activities on their dossier. And sometimes we have to figure out how we talk about it, right? It's not just being the chair of a committee. It's not just holding a particular role. It's how you've actually had impact, which is what all these fellowships are really about, and how that connects deeply to your scholarship. And so I think when I see this stuff come together nicely, the scholarship is stronger because it's so grounded. And the impact, I think, is more sustainable because it does have that evidence base. I think the final thing we need to do to really kind of make sure the future looks good, and I think we can do this, are the types of health system reforms that put a greater premium on performance. If there's a complaint that we'd all have, it's that our system is still heavily politicized. It's that our system is organized by kind of connections or other things. The more that we focus on the goals that we want in the system, the higher the premium that evidence and the ability to actually understand and work with evidence will command. And look, here we are at the Science Policy Conference. Natasha Gallant, Logan Lawrence have actually organized this very, very cool thing. Let's just see this as kind of like one more step in building this sort of cultural transformation that we want.
So I just want to pick up on one thing you said about, performance and the system, valuing performance more, and ask, is it performance we want to value or learning? I'm just going to be provocative a little bit.
Yeah. So I think learning is a way that we actually improve performance, right? We want a learning health system, not because learning is intrinsically good, but because of what it does for, first and foremost, the patients and the caregivers affected by the system, but what it also does for the people working within the system. And it has this role that actually probably makes everyone more engaged and more satisfied, but it also has this role that it drives better and better performance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So where do we need to go? I know the first time I heard somebody said, well, let's just have an award for early career researchers. Let's fund those because we don't have enough of that. Is that really going to solve the problem for people who've been trained in an embedded fashion? How are we going to nudge the system? And is it a nudge or is it an investment? Like, what is it that it takes to change the system? And Staney, if you want to answer that, great. If not, I'll go to Tara.
I'll take one more little run at it and then turn over to someone who's actually living every day with Tara. Look, I think we need to build this cohort of people like we're building now, because they are going to move through the system, and that's going to be the most organic way of really building something sustainable. The other thing too is that I notice sometimes when I'm talking to decision makers or, the employers who brought these people in, they're starting to talk and ask me questions like, okay, where do we get more? How do we find more of these people? How do we see this kind of working through? And interestingly enough, the Ontario government just actually started a program locally for its own fellows to try to continue to build this cohort. And so I think the more that we have really exciting, really dynamic people out, they're going to be the best way of kind of moving this along.
Mm.
It looks like we might have a question in the discussion forum too.
Yeah, I asked that. It's the same question essentially about how do we support the early career research fellows. So I've been pushing along that a bit. Tara, I want to come to you, and then Deepa, I want you to contrast this to the not-for-profit world, because here we've got Steny talking mostly about the health system, and Tara's going to talk about her experience with the health system and what else it takes to help you in the health system to embed more people who are finishing their training and moving on. But then what about the not-for-profit world? It might be quite a different set of circumstances. So Tara.
Yeah, I think it's important to continue to think about that value proposition. There's a lot that we're talking about here, and it can be demonstrated in a number of ways. I feel like we also have to think about the type of impact they're having and what kind of transformation. So for me, part of it is the system needs to invest, and I think people are learning. So as I even see, and we've had many examples like in our cancer care program, and I think Steny, you were talking about it, where people do come forward and say, I want more positions like this. How do we support them in really creating those? And I think part of our strategy with Gail as the VP has been to really create that funding structure to have people embedded. But, it has to be more than, a person with that kind of a vision to come. It has to be something that we think about all the time, and to really have positions that have both that academic and the system lens. And I think we really need to encourage our fellows and embedded scientists to continue to hold that research profile as well. I think that's really key, because that's one of the reasons we find the value in these positions and roles. And for us, definitely, because sometimes we start to begin to think like, it's almost like as we think about our patient partners, we really want to help them continue to bring that. And, it's almost like you don't want to start to think about like a system person. I encourage that our fellows continue to bring that academic and that evidence perspective, which keeps them a little bit at an arm's length. And I value that as a system leader, that we encourage them to hold both. So for me, anyway, it's a bit of an investment. It's about the value proposition, but it's also to maintain the integrity or the value of the position in the way we intended it to be.
Interesting. So it helps to maintain the culture shift that you're trying to create. Okay, so Deepa, how feasible is it to continue that academic profile at the same time that you're doing the work in your not-for-profit?
It is not for the faint of heart. It is hard work. I think everyone in the health system and the not-for-profit world are used to working like this because they're so very committed and they have very similar goals. And those goals are to make impact for the patients, for the families, for the caregivers that we are trying to serve. And so for the not-for-profit world, Jonathan and I can add rigor, we can add evidence, we can add capacity to organizations that may not have had this type of reach or capacity before. And that impact, I think, can be greater. So, in the learning health system or in the health system, you've got your clinicians, you've got your researchers. In the not-for-profit world, you don't tend to see these types of positions so often. And so the impact that we can create and how we can merge our worlds, that can create a lot of impact for community organizations that are actually out there, launching programs that are with the same goal, with the intention of increasing the health and well-being of that patient population. And so, there's so much synergy there. And, just circling back to that comment about the early career award, I think there's a real practical consideration that we need to face in a fiscal climate like this, especially for organizations in the not-for-profit world that are less resourced than you say your hospitals and your big research centers and your universities. Those are often the organizations that need that capacity and those resources the most. And so in this, like awards, fellowships can help build that and spread the learning health system concept approach, the approach of evidence-informed decision making, and often those not-for-profits, like the advocacy side, can reach those policymakers faster. You know, policymakers care about what the public feels and thinks about things, and so it's merging all those worlds and giving those organizations the capacity. And I think that's what the fellowship and what an early career award can do for organizations that don't have that resource base similar to others. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I became slightly cynical that funding solves all problems when I started as I finished as an inaugural scientific director for CIHR in the 2000s, that, you know, just putting knowledge translation in the legislation and in the budget for CIHR hasn't created the kind of change in 20 years that some of us might have hoped for. So my cynicism comes a little bit from there. But Meg, I want to come to you and ask the question. So you're kind of you sit in that seat where you observe all kinds of different experiences from fellows and from mentors and host organizations. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the observed differences in terms of host organizations continuing to embed fellows. Is it really our poor cousins in the not-for-profit who are most in need of early career research award, or is it across the board? What's your sense of that? Because I know you've been thinking, what next?
Thanks, Anne. I mean, I think one of the really exciting things about the program is that it's seen interest and demand for folks like Deepa and Natasha and Logan and the other fellows across the board, across the country, across different types of organizations, across different sizes of organizations, across different sectors. So there really truly have been hospitals, health authorities, health charities, small, big not-for-profits, private sector organizations, you name it, pan-Canadian health organizations. There's been great diversity in the types of organizations that have found value in the Health System Impact Fellowship program, and that's been exciting. And so what we've seen is that, you know, it's a co-funded model, and so the idea of contributing not just in kind, like the immensely valuable in-kind contribution of the mentorship and of the training, but the actual financial contribution to the award has not been a barrier to entry for anyone. It's so far it's been broadly taken up, and there have been new organizations that join year over year, and there have been continued organizations that come back year over year. And so for those organizations that come back, it's really prompting us to think, okay, well, what is the next step of how you create something that is sustainable? And how can funding be a lever to nudge towards sustainable positions, embedded research positions within health system organizations, so that the capacity that's been generated by way of the fellowship does not end with the fellowship itself. And I think what we've seen in Nova Scotia is that it's happening. It's possible. Great things are flourishing from an initially small investment in embedded research capacity has just flourished. And so if other provinces and regions can take notice and build on sort of the approach that leaders like Tara and Gail Tomlin-Murphy are taking within the province, then great things can happen from a reasonably initially small investment. So where to next in terms of early career awards? We had a conversation with Deepa and a group of other fellows actually just last week about where are the organizations or the types of organizations where that early career stage would make sense. And so I think we're at early stages of the thinking. Rick Glazer, Aaron Thompson, and I are involved in focus group conversations. We'll be meeting with health system supervisors and universities in the coming days. And so really look forward to the conversation and the input of the panel and participants today around where to next in terms of supporting early career researchers through awards or other mechanisms that might add greater value.
So again, if people have questions, please put them in the discussion forum. That would be more than welcome. I want to bring us round towards the end of the plenary, and so that we can go into breakout and just say, in thinking about this, where to next. I think there are many different players that could be part of the where to next. Obviously, the CIHR Institute for Health Services and Policy Research has a big role to play here. In terms of funding programs, our health system partners have a big role to play in the culture change and supporting and accepting and working with fellows. And the organization which I'm the executive director of, the Canadian Health Services and Policy Research Alliance, is here. We were there to help launch and get the program off the ground and think about the design. ISPR has now funded it, but given where we're at and we want to think about the future, what's your best advice to me in this role of executive director of the Alliance for what I should be doing next to really support our fellows and the alum from the program in the next steps? What organizational work do I need to do? What funding work does ISPR need to do? What do others need to do? So I just maybe we'll go around the panel and get that question. And that kind of launches us into the conversation for the breakouts, which will be about what experiences our participants have with these kinds of embedded training models, and what do they think the critical success factors are? What can we be doing to get more of this? Because even if we don't have all the data in yet, Meg, I think we're all convinced here on the panel that this is a really good thing to be doing, and we want it to be even better and more powerful. So, so Deepa, what's your best advice to me in my role as executive director of CHESPRA, or to Meg as a representative of a funder, or to Steny as a dean for health services, or Tara as a leader in a health system? How can we make this? How can we keep going and make this even better?
I think something that has come up a lot is what does the career track or career pathway look like? And some thinking of providing a model for what that looks like for this new kind of hybrid career. It doesn't really exist. We're carving it out. We're saying, okay, if I meet some of these academic requirements, then I can have a university email appointment or adjunct appointment, and I satisfy that and have the capacity to hold grants, create research, and make impact in that space. Then how do I align that with the work I'm doing in the system or in the policy organization or the not-for-profit? And we're carving this out ourselves, like the fellows are very much carving it out. And can we get some help from you guys as the experts of what this career trajectory may look like, with the acknowledgement that it's varying from fellow to fellow, organization to organization? But is there some sort of standards we can apply that look at what are success factors? What does success look like? How can universities support this? Maybe a more professional career-oriented path or hybrid scientist path, and actually embed that into into their academic tracks. So we have tenure tracks and that kind of thing. Is there a new track for embedded scientists that universities can get on board with? I think the organizations kind of know what they need the job description to read, but it's how do we align the academic sphere so that instead of us straddling it, we very much know where we're headed. Like, we know that I have an embedded research career. This makes sense to UT, or this makes sense to SFU or UBC. And I have my career trajectory and milestones I have to meet, just like if I was, a full-time assistant professor without that embedded piece. I think that's one thing that would help the fellows' perspective.
Yeah, so Steny made his exit at a judicious time, because I would have come to him next as the dean of a school of public health to talk about that. What is he doing, and what do our academies need to do? But Meg, I know you're also apprised of what's happening in training modernization, and I wonder if you can comment about where we're at in trying to change the culture of our academic institutions, and what do you in your role, me in my role, need to do to help with that?
Thanks, Diane. I mean, through CHESPRA and the Training Modernization Working Group and Steny's leadership, the Training Modernization Working Group is evolving to include deans from across the country who are committed to really changing the paradigm for the way doctoral training occurs. And so really embedding enriched core competencies and experiential learning within doctoral training programs and working together to figure out what that looks like and how it ought to be done. And so it's really exciting to see the change take place within the academic system, because we heard back in 2015 when this work started that that would be the hardest spot for it to occur, but it's starting to occur. And it comes down to great people with great vision and great passion for change and commitment to that change. And so we're fortunate to be, I think, in a country with individuals like Steny and Tara and up and comers like Deepa and Natasha and Logan, who are all, share a commitment to this sort of collective vision. So I'd say, and Steny, I don't know if you heard, but so I'll turn it over to you after, but I think the change is occurring within the academic system, and the change is also occurring within the health system, which is evidenced by way of the maybe flourishing is too strong of a word, the expansion of learning health system type models across the country, the increase in embedded research and embedded research units within health system organizations. So it's starting to happen. There was a really interesting special issue that came out from PCORI, Academy Health, and AHRQ on embedded research as a strategy for learning health systems just this summer. And one of the main points within that series that came through was that there is still a need for investment within health system organizations in research. So that also, it seems to be part of the picture, and we've seen interest in that by way of the fellowship program, but probably more needs to occur. So what we will do specifically is a really great question, Diane, and we're still trying to figure that out, but it is one that we're deeply committed to, and to working with our partners in the academic sector, in the health sector, and trainees to work together to get it right.
So Steny, you ducked out at exactly the right time when Deepa was moaning about our academic institutions being, I'm going to be facetious here, intransigent in changing their metrics and what it takes to build an academic career. And I wonder if you can comment about what do we need to do? How are we going to change this system? I mean, as an old fart academic, I try to do what I can from where I sit, but I don't have that kind of power. So the kind of power that you have, what can we do? What's going to make the change?
Sure. No, I heard everything. I think Deepa just sort of blacked me out because she wanted to be able to talk about stuff without stepping in. So look, it's a really good point, right? I think there's a couple, three things that we can do that will help do this sort of stuff or move it along well. One of which is to figure out how we take people in Deepa's role, or the type of role she's got, and make sure that they kind of function as full members of the academy. And slowly and steadily, we're figuring out how to do this. It's tricky sometimes, but we've been able to do it a little bit at the University of Toronto. And I tend to think, given our tendency towards rules and rituals and policies, that if we can do that, probably everyone can. And so that's the first way to look at it. The second way I think maybe we can do is to start to create a different sort of career models that people can see easily. And so, maybe I'm at the tail end of one of those and Deepa's at the start of it. But I really think, having the opportunity to have worked in a variety of different settings was really, really helpful for me in every aspect of my career. And so to kind of push those along, I think would be really helpful. I don't think we have enough diversity in those career models to really kind of help people see where they're going. Yeah. I think the third thing is we can do a much better job of preparing our students right at the front end. And I'll give a really kind of one of many compliments I should give to Meg. She and a team of people at U of T have been actually building a new course that kind of lays out for our students what the full range of options are and how they kind of develop into those options and roles. So, just to kind of recap, I think more work at the front end of training to make this clear is going to be transformative, and it's going to allow us to get a lot more Deepas into the system. I think if the universities relax a little bit and kind of recognize the scholarly nature of the work, that's a great thing. And if I think we start to kind of lay out what successful careers look like that aren't full-time, 100% lifelong in the academy, we'll start to kind of create a bit of a pull for this as well.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, my experience at this end of my career is how difficult, even as a researcher, to unlearn the meritocracy that I lived in and grew in for so many years. But Tara, I'm sort of curious to know, how are you working with your academic partners, or are you working with your academic partners to sort of help change the culture in the academy as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of our intention is to have this almost, I see this as a bridging space for the health system and the academic partners. So our health system impact fellows really bring us together. So even as you put this program, which really brings your academic mentors and health system mentors together, there's already those relations being made. And for us, it's equally important that our academic partners, so as an example, we talked about that negotiating, the health systems want to do something today and the evidence for today. But as we work with our academic partners, what we generate today, we want it to become the evidence that is, going through CIHR grants and others, and our fellows feel that, connection between what they are trying to help the system understand, but also the connection. So I feel that a big part of our strategy is really the engagement of our academic partners in bringing the embedded positions. So I think that's critical for us to recognize that just because we have these embedded positions, it doesn't mean now the health system is self-contained. It is about those partnerships and how we bring the two worlds together. They almost are, to me, boundary spanners now.
Hmm.
They can really start to bring the partnerships stronger. So that's what I feel that, and I feel like, I want to build upon what Deepa's point. I think that's really critical, in the role, or what we can draw from all of you is that to really start to articulate what these positions are. And I think also to take some practical organizations or health systems that are trying to do this, what does that look like, and to really map that out and maybe bring that for others to see. So both the fellows who will go into these positions and for we can learn to see what can this look like. We are kind of doing our own thing and trying to create the future career for these fellows, but we would love to work with all of you to understand what that can look like.
Hmm. Hmm. So maybe there's another piece of work there for us to think about, Meg, from Chesmer's point of view, in training modernization. My own reaction when I hear the idea of, let's work out some career paths is, well, but there's hundreds of career paths, aren't there? There's, if everybody is able, if people pivot, then they pivot in ways that they never would have expected. When I started as a basic scientist, I never imagined I would be a scientific director at CIHR, the CEO of a provincial funder, and now an executive director of a health services alliance. I'm trained as a basic scientist. So I like to say that we need mappers, moles, and mutts in science. The mappers like to see the big picture. The moles is what we reward in academia, digging deeper and deeper into a narrower and narrower hole until you're the only expert that's left, or you're the only one left, so you're the expert. And mutts like me, we like to piss on every tree, and in that way we help with that integration. So. Okay, so we're getting close to time for our breakouts. I just wanted to see, is there anything I forgot to ask about that you thought was really important for today's dialogue about early career researchers and their future? So if there's anything that I didn't ask that you were hoping to tell me about or tell the audience about, now is your opportunity. Meg, is there anything I forgot? No? Anybody? See your hands if you.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
add, I think I hear this all the time from our fellows. I feel like people need to know the options. Like they need to know what can these career options look like. Not that we are trying to pull them in any one way, but it's just hard. Like, when you come and you have this, academic background, or you're thinking in one way, I feel like people really need to understand what the options are. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Anything from you, Staney? Any last words?
No last words to me other than just say, anyone who's thinking about the program, please apply. The better and better people we get in, the better and better the program will be, and the better and better our system will be.
Yeah, agreed. Deepa, any final thoughts?
No, I think one final thought. I think to your point about yes, people shift and we can't map out 100 career trajectories. However, a place to start, there is a mapped out career trajectory for professors. It's there. It's laid out in front of us. We know what milestones we have to hit. And if we want to keep the alignment with the academy, there's a place to start and say to how do you carve that out for hybrid or embedded scientists? Like it's a clear place to start. The system role may be more difficult to carve out because that can vary. But that role, it is very much carved out for a traditional professor. So what does that look like for an embedded scientist?
So we probably need to get back to that conversation that we had, I think, 2 years ago at the last face-to-face Casper meeting about how to help fellows put, as you spoke to, Steny, put the impact of their embedded fellowship into their academic CV. What are the ways in which we can get the academy to read and validate and value the work of our embedded scientists? So I think I'm right on time now to move us into the breakouts. So over to the tech folks. The two questions that we're asking you to speak to are, what are your experiences with training models in embedded, training models in embedded scientists? Since I don't know where most of you are working, I think it would be really valuable for the folks behind the scenes of this program to understand other models that they can look at and understand where impact for embedding comes from. And then also, what do you think are the critical success factors for embedded, for the careers, the career trajectory, can't speak anymore, the career trajectories of embedded scientists. So tech folks, over to you to move people into the breakouts. And we'll come back just for one final reflection. So thank you. And I think each of the speakers can go into a different room. Okay. Great to see you, or not see you, actually, is the case in this particular format. But I wonder whether our tech guy can bring our panelists back just for any final reflections on the conversation they heard. That would be great. And thank you for invite anybody else who's left and as a participant that wants to put their best advice for the future of embedded researchers into the discussion forum. I would welcome that. But panelists, just anything you heard that was surprising or you want to think a bit more about from the dialogues that you just had with folks. Anybody? Staney, anything, any new ideas come out of that conversation?
I think just one of the things that all sort of strikes me about this is that we need to kind of make sure that people really do know about the fellowship, really do know about these sorts of models and understand kind of how broadly applicable they are, and maybe even do a little more work trying to make sure that the folks who are tempted or interested in this are matched well in a way that kind of helps them develop their career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Deepa, any thoughts that you came out of that conversation? You're on mute. You're on mute, Deepa.
Oh my God, it's 2 years later, I'm still doing that. Okay, so I think that we had a really great discussion about inquiry into what kind of background would the fellowship. I think, and that good fit for if the fellowship is a good fit for them. And so, yeah, a little bit more work about like encouraging applications of all different diverse backgrounds that are applicable, because that often can create change in a way that we didn't anticipate. And just a final note that like this is a really great opportunity. It has been a life-changing experience for myself and most of my colleagues, and truly an amazing program.
Great. Thanks, Deepa. Meg, any observations you want to leave us with?
I think we're at the beginning of something great. So the fellowship program has grown quickly in a few short years, but I think we're still at the beginning stages of the art of the possible, and really look forward to working with the fellows, with the universities, with the health system organizations, with alliances like CHESPRA to further grow and build a new cadre of embedded scientists and increase capacity for real impact in the health system. So I'm excited, and today's conversation was further spark to that enthusiasm, and really look forward to next steps.
Great. Thanks, Meg. And Tara, any final thoughts that you want to offer?
No, I think this was such a great opportunity and conversation. So I feel like there's a lot to learn together, but there's also a lot of work to be done to really bring the messaging out, to really bring some better understanding as we continue to do this. So I'm really excited to work with all of you to really demonstrate the value as we've been continuing to do this, but also to bring the systems into the space in a stronger way.
Thank you. So let me just close out the session by first thanking Natasha Gallant and Logan Lawrence, who organized this session on behalf of the people you see here. They did all the background work and made it easy for us to participate. And thanks to the panelists. That was a lot of fun. I always enjoy the opportunity to ask hard questions to smart people. So thank you, Natasha and Logan, for inviting me to do this. And thanks to everybody who's still here listening and was interested in the conversation that we had today. And hopefully it is just the beginning or early in the game, and we will continue to push forward in creating new models for our pedagogy and for the work that we do. So thanks, everybody. Really a lot of fun. And I look forward to seeing most of you in a Zoom screen near me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.